Hello friends, with this we move on to security forces and security agencies. This is the 12th chapter of the book, and in this chapter we introduce the security forces and agencies. We start with a discussion on why there are so many security forces, so many central police forces in the country, what is the need for that. Thereafter we move to what are the various central armed police forces. We discuss the role of BSF, which is basically to protect the India-Pakistan, India-Bangladesh borders. We then move on to the ITBP, Integrated Border Police, which basically protects India's border with China. Then we move on to Sashastra Seema Bal, SSB, which protects Indo-Nepal and Indo-Bhutan border. Thereafter we move to CRPF, Central Reserve Police Force, which is basically the country's important internal security force. And then we move on to the Central Industrial Security Force, CISF, which basically protects India's vital assets, industries, airports, and so on. Friends, after this, we move to the paramilitary forces, in which we discuss the role of Assam Rifles, which is basically to protect the India-Myanmar border and also conduct counterinsurgency operations in the northeast. Thereafter, friends, we move to Indian Coast Guard, which is basically which has the responsibility of protecting India's coast in coordination with the state police, state marine police, and the Indian Navy. And then we also have a discussion on the Special Frontier Force, which is a special force deployed for covert intelligence gathering and operations, especially with respect to India-China border. Friends, we then have a discussion on specialized and other forces like the National Security Guard (NSG), which is basically a premier elite force for conducting anti-terrorist operations, hostage situations, dealing with them, and so on. And then we study the Special Protection Group (SPG), which is tasked with ensuring the security of India's Prime Minister, his family, his immediate family members, and former Prime Ministers also. And then we study the recent amendment in SPG Act in 2019. We have a box on that. We then move to the RPF, Railway Protection Force, which is tasked with the responsibility of protecting India's railway assets, the people concerned, railway tracks, the goods in railway's custody, and so on, keeping the movement safe and secure. We then move on to the National Disaster Response Force, which basically is to respond in cases of calamities and disasters. After these specialized forces, we move on to investigative agencies. Here we discuss the role of CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, which is country's premier investigation agency, which deals with important cases of corruption and economic offences and petty crimes and so on. We have a discussion also on the role of CBI and vis-a-vis the states, how much power the CBI has to conduct the cases, what are permissions it needs. So all these things have been discussed in CBI, in the topic of CBI. We then move on to National Investigation Agency, which is the country's leading agency for probing terror-related cases. And then we have a discussion on Enforcement Directorate, which basically conducts investigation of cases under Prevention of Money Laundering Act (PMLA). After these investigative agencies, we then move on to the intelligence agencies, namely the Intelligence Bureau, which is the foremost agency for gathering intelligence related to the internal security of the country. It deals with all aspects such as terrorism, political agitations, regional disputes, and so on. We then move on to the Research and Analysis Wing, which is basically India's external intelligence agency. We have also a discussion on Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the body for collating all defense-related intelligence informations. We have a discussion on a Multi-Agency Center, which is a body set up in 2002 for collating and disseminating terror-related intelligence to all the concerned agencies. Then we have a discussion on NATGRID. We have already discussed NATGRID in the chapter on terrorism. We have a discussion on National Technical Research Organization. We thereafter move to the Economic Intelligence Setup of India, where we discuss the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU-INT, which has an important role vis-a-vis preventing money laundering and terror financing. Then we move on to some other agencies like the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, the Narcotics Control Bureau, and the Bureau of Police Research and Development, BPRD. After which, friends, we move on to the National Crime Records Bureau, NCRB, and the Crime and Criminal Tracking and Network System, CCTNS. Friends, after these, we move on to the apex bodies related to national security. These include the Cabinet Committee on Security, which is the highest policy-making body with respect to the country's National Security. It is headed by the Prime Minister. And then we move on to the National Security Council, which is headed by the National Security Advisor. We have a discussion on the Strategic Policy Group, which is a component of the National Security Council. We also have a discussion on the National Security Advisory Board. We also discussed the Joint Intelligence Committee. It was recently subsumed in the Joint Intelligence Committee was recently subsumed within the NSC. So as such, as of now, this body does not exist as a separate body, but for historical reasons I have mentioned this body also, since up to very recently it was there in existence. And lastly, we have a discussion on the National Security Council Secretariat. Friends, this chapter is basically a survey of all these agencies, and hope you enjoy this chapter.